Have you ever had the experience where you don't want to look at your numbers because you know that they don't look as good as you'd like them to be, or maybe that you missed the target and you really just don't feel really good about it? Well, if that's you, make sure to listen to today's episode because I share with you a powerful story of a client who was kind of operating from that same place. But when we sat down and looked at his numbers, how it completely transformed his sense of confidence, his sense of clarity, and his sense of certainty about how to actually make change in his business. Hi, I'm Vicki Suter. Welcome back to the Profit Builder Unscripted. And today I want to talk about your numbers, or more specifically, I want to talk about your maybe unwillingness to look at your numbers because you don't like what they have to say. And I've seen this over and over again over the years of working with contractors, that a lot of times you have a tendency to not want to look at the results when they're not good. I mean, that's true for all of us, right? Like, we don't like necessarily leaning into and looking at the things that make us feel bad, or it's bad news, or it's not what we said we wanted to do, or we didn't hit the mark, right? All those things that have us sort of want to shy away from or not look at it because we already know it's not what we wanted the results to be. But the thing that I found is that when you start to look at your results, you look at your data, whether that's your profit and loss statement or it's job cost data against your actual, your bid that you did, or it's looking at any kind of data in your business that gives you feedback about how effective you are. While there's this sting initially of, well, I didn't hit the mark, the thing about looking at the data is that what it'll tell you is a story. It'll tell you the story of, well, how big of a gap was it between where I was and where I said I wanted to be? Or what is it that didn't work about that I can improve it? Because the thing is, if you can't see it, if you have no ability to be able to have that clarity about the numbers, you're not going to have the confidence to know what actions you need to take differently next time in order to produce a different result. I'll give you an example. I was having a conversation with my client, Joe, a couple of weeks ago, and we started looking at his financial data for the last 5 years. And we just pulled up a profit and loss statement out of his QuickBooks, software. And we compared it year over year. And I started to notice some things. We were looking at revenue, and then we were looking at gross profit margin, and we were looking at overhead expenses. We were looking at net profit. And I said, we just started to notice, what was the story the numbers tell? What was the trend? Where was their overhead going up really high, or was the revenue dropping, or was their gross profit margin dropping? I mean, there were certain key numbers that we were looking at that as we started to look at the numbers, like the lights started to go on for Joe, and he started to talk about, oh, I'm beginning to see where I need to focus my time and energy in order to affect a different result on the bottom line. Because ultimately, if you're in a for-profit business, right, then there's a certain number that you want to make on the bottom line. There's a certain profit you want to make. Well, the only way that you can get that clarity about what are the, in that confidence to know what actions you want to take to make a difference in that bottom line is to have a relationship with that data, to look at those numbers and look at that feedback in order to be able to see what's working, what's not working, and what needs to be different. And what was great with Joe is he was, and he said to me at some point in the conversation, he said, I resist looking at my numbers. I know they're not what I want them to be, but now I'm starting to see that when I look at them, I can have a greater sense of clarity about what's working and what's not working, so that I have the confidence to know what I need to change and what I need to do differently. Because up until this point, the other thing that Joe shared with me is, he goes, I just operate out of this sense of angst and anxiety and this trying to run really fast and stay in front of it, in hopes that it'll turn out differently, in hopes that there'll be more money in the bank at the end. But the thing for you that you want to look at in your business is, how do I lean into looking at the data so that I have a greater sense of clarity, so I have more confidence about where I specifically need to change? And, Joe said to me, he goes, I feel like I don't necessarily like what the numbers that we just went over showed me. But the thing that I am finding interesting right now is I have a greater sense of calm about what I need to do next. And I have a greater sense of confidence about what I need to do next. Had we not looked at those with Joe, he would have not had that. He would have just kept on that cycle of, just that angst of trying to stay in front of it. Can you relate to that at all? Like, does that happen for you? If it does, or even if you're just like you're avoiding looking, and maybe that's not necessarily your experience, but you avoid looking, I'm going to tell you that I have seen this so many times over the last 30 years as I've worked with contractors, that when you look at your numbers, when you look at your data, when you can see the gap between where you are and where you want to be, then you can have a much greater ability to impact your results, because you have that clarity to give you the confidence to be able to take more powerful actions. So I invite you to go look at your numbers and lean into the bad news, or maybe sometimes it's not even as bad news as you think. But lean into looking at your results, because it's the key to your freedom and your peace of mind. And it's your key to being able to have more control, quite frankly, over the results that you create in your business. One thing that you might check out, if you're not comfortable reading your profit and loss statement or your balance sheet for your business, you're not really sure how to do that, make sure to go check out my video on, I have different topics here on my blog and also on my YouTube channel. One of them is getting confident in your numbers. Go check out that category of playlist or blog category. And there's some videos on there that will actually teach you how to read and interpret your financial data. So that might be a good place for you to begin, just to start to get that greater sense of clarity so that you have more confidence about how can you impact your bottom line. So make sure to check out the resources below, because in it, I give you a link to a video that will help you understand how to even look at your numbers and help you walk through it so that it brings more meaning and purpose to it. But also there's another resource in there that I share with you about benchmarks of what are some targets you might want to hit for your business, depending on if you're a general or a subcontractor. All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of this community. Make sure to subscribe if you like this content and you want more content just like this. And if there's somebody else that you know who could value from this content, I just ask you to please share it. All right. Thanks. I look forward to seeing you next time on the Profit Builder Unscripted.